Hello, welcome to Meet the Author, sponsored by the Author Event Network in partnership with the Bremerton Public Access Television. I'm your host, Guy Morris. Author Event Network is a nonprofit association of local authors who sign books at local festivals, fairs, and events. Our guest today is Catherine Matthews. Hello, Catherine. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Glad to be here.
It's so good to see you. I know you're a new member. I'm excited to actually know more about you myself.
Yeah.
Well, first off, this is always a good place to start. Authors are a very strange breed. It's not like we're in it for the money. So, let's start by telling us what inspired you to become an author.
Well, this is an interesting path that I took. I was an educator, as a matter of fact, a teacher and then a principal and an administrator. I started writing about 2015, and I started with a blog about photography, which very quickly morphed into stories of my childhood and the lessons that I'd learned in life. My father had become ill, and as I was writing this blog, lots of emotions started to bubble up, and rather than become a sort of nonfiction how-to blog, it became, the lessons that I learned from my father and the lessons of being a teacher. And lots of emotions started to come to the surface. And one day I was thinking about my experience of being in Alaska, something that he loved dearly. He loved Alaska. And in fact, I went to Alaska largely based on the stories that he told me about how amazing it was. And I was thinking about a scene where I was in Alaska, and I thought, I could probably make a novel, starting with this one scene. And of course, the novel is not in any way autobiographical. However, it was the spark. Those memories were sort of the spark of my the beginning of my first novel, Releasing the Reins, my debut. Yeah, so once I started that novel, I just could not stop. And in fact, just recently published a second novel a year later that just came out. Yeah.
So the inspiration was this experience with your father?
Very much so.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was very much a storyteller. I don't know that he would say it. English major, and he worked for a publishing company, so I was surrounded by books as a
wonderful
child.
Upbringing. Yeah,
really was, as a matter of fact. And there were no limits. Like there was no limits on what I was allowed to read. And I even remember as a child, he would pull out Norton's anthology, and that would be sort of what he read at night to me.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so I grew up very much loving literature and writing. Most of my writing until I started writing the blog, in fact, was more academic writing. But boy, once I really put my emotions to the page, the stories really just sort of flowed.
That's a wonderful story. I can't even compare to contrast to that. I'm more of a street rat. My interpretation of that would be like, so you got the drug early, huh?
Yeah, very much.
Something like that. Okay. Well, tell us what genres you write, and why did you choose that particular genre?
So my first book is women's fiction suspense, although some people have categorized it as well as a contemporary Western novel. It's set in Alaska on a horse ranch. My second novel I call a Sisters Road Trip Family Secrets novel, but it is in fact women's fiction as well, and I think probably book club fiction. Women's fiction is very misunderstood. Women's fiction technically is a novel where the plot is driven by the transformation of the character, and a lot of times we say, well, in any novel, the characters are transformed. But there's a very big difference between the novel being driven by the mystery of a murder or the love affair, or the romance of two people, and the novel's plot really being driven by how it will transform the characters. So, I mean, I think overall I write women's fiction, but I also think every book has multiple genres, I'm finding. And I think it helps us to pick a novel. For example, I don't really read horror too much because I'm a chicken. So that genre distinction makes a difference to me. But otherwise, I read very, very widely, and I look for a story that touches and moves me, and that's really what I try to do. I try to engage the reader as emotionally as I can. I am never as happy as when somebody tells me they laughed or they cried when they were reading a movie book.
Yeah. There's one of my books, and for whatever reason, that one in the pitch that I've learned with that one is to tell people they will laugh, they will cry, they'll grip their nails till they'll break, but they'll end with a smile.
Yeah.
And that seems to be like, I should just say that about every book.
Right, yeah.
It seems to work.
Yeah.
So as a guy, I'm always kind of wondering exactly what that means to women.
Women's fiction, the term women's fiction,
We interpret it a little different. It's stories about women's relationships with themselves and how that transforms them and how they grow from those relationships, both the conflicts and the support. And it's about relationships, and then sort of like a Thelma and Louise, the plot kind of happens from those emotional moments, kind of thing.
I guess.
But it's hard. These are very strange perspectives. But I'm not a deep reader, so I might be getting it totally wrong. So I'm just saying, I'm really glad you explained your perspective, because it's sometimes hard to understand all the genres because you can't read them all.
Absolutely, and I happen to be the vice president of technology for the Women's Fiction Writers Association, which is an international organization focused on women's fiction, the writers of women's fiction. And a common misconception is that only women write women's fiction, and I would argue Nicholas Sparks is a women's fiction author.
Okay.
And the other misconception is that the main character is always a woman, and that's also not true.
Interesting.
The main character could be a man, it could be, any gender. The key is that transformation driving the plot of the story, that the story is about that emotional experience of the that main character. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it, frankly.
That's excellent. And then, well, in that sense, you could build that kind of character development within any genre.
Exactly, and that is the truth.
Or a thriller, or a sci-fi, or a fantasy.
Exactly.
It really seems like it's really around the strong focus of the character development itself, where the plot really kind of can fit around that.
Right, and I think that is being more acknowledged by organizations. In fact, Releasing the Reins won women's fiction mystery suspense, and it won women's fiction suspense in another category, and then just women's fiction. So I think the awards organizations, which are largely driven by the industry, are acknowledging that you can write women's fiction that is a suspense, that is a romance, that is a mystery, or even science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Very, very cool. I'm learning something. What do you consider the key themes in your books? What are your basic themes?
So these two books are very different. And of course, themes vary. An author doesn't always pursue the same themes throughout books. In Releasing the Reins, I think the major theme is belonging and acceptance. What would we do to find that place we can belong as our authentic self? And if we find it, what would we be willing to risk to keep it? With Roadside Sisters, it is a story of three sisters who are really struggling with what it means to be in a sisterhood, and what are those bonds of sisterhood. What can we forgive, and what can we not forgive in life? This is a story that really circles around some family secrets that have kept two of the sisters apart for decades. And they have to understand themselves and what those secrets meant to them, and whether or not they can forgive themselves for their part in those secrets, but whether or not they can forgive others for keeping secrets from them.
Yeah, that would be hard.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Now, does that go across both of them? Well, tell me about the Releasing the Reins, the experience you wrote with your, kind of inspired by your father.
Yeah, so Releasing the Reins is set in Alaska at a horse ranch, and it centers around a woman whose name is Bunny. And Bunny has only ever wanted to work on a farm. Her family had a dairy farm, and she worked side by side with her brothers her whole life, and then finds out one day that her father is going to give the farm to all of her brothers and cut her out because she's a woman. And this is sort of an existential moment for her, where she realizes that she was never seen as equal, and that none of her hard work makes up for the fact that she's a girl. And so she storms off to Alaska to prove herself, and then finds herself essentially in a similar situation. And unable to escape this, she has to struggle to find her place in the world. And in the process, discovers that the daughter of the man who owns the ranch she works at, that her death may not have been an accident, and she has to unravel sort of what happened to this woman and how does it relate to her own struggle for self-acceptance, and also for finding that place that she can belong in the world exactly as she is.
Yeah, I like the murder mystery twist.
Yeah, that's a fun thing to write.
I'm always teasing our murder mystery authors. I said, is it a novel or is it research? You don't need to tell me, but just blink. You've told us about some of your primary characters and some of the nuances. What was it about your personal experiences that what was it about some of your personal experiences that kind of made you want to write some of this? I know about your father and the ranch and his love of Seattle, but there's something there, and I don't want to push too hard, but if you can give us a peek, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I am a sister.
Okay.
In fact, I recently wrote an essay that
Have you forgiven her?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm a.
Just wanted to get
I
that
have
out.
a lot of sisters. I have 3 sisters, but this is also not a biographical book. However, my youngest sister and I love to road trip together, and this particular novel was actually born on the highway out of Rome, Georgia, on the way to Calhoun, Georgia, where there is a rock garden that is just magnificent. It's at a church, and the members of this church, as a meditative practice, have built this unbelievable rock garden. I mean, it has Notre Dame and the city of Bethlehem and the Colosseum and on and on and on.
Wow.
My sister loves road trips, and as we were driving along, she sort of said, wouldn't it be fun to write a book about sisters on a road trip, because we are always laughing. And so that was kind of the spark of the book, and it married with this moment where I discovered a photograph of my childhood when I was about 3 years old.
Wow.
That when I looked at it, I thought, I think my memories might be, some of my memories might be inaccurate or incomplete.
Interesting.
And if they are, I wonder how my sisters remember this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking about how, as adults, we act, we have relationships that are informed or driven by all these experiences that we have as kids. Mm-hmm. And we don't know everything. In fact, when we're kids, we're very egocentric beings. You know, we know this if we're educators for sure. That, and it's not a criticism of kids, it's just that when you're a kid, everything's about you. You know, that's a normal part of growing up, is discovering it's not all about you, right?
Okay.
So when you're a kid, everything that happens to you, you understand or make sense of how it relates to you, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem is that those memories are very deep and very well rooted, and then they inform how you interpret future events, on and on and on, as they sort of cascade through your life to adulthood. And so looking at this picture, I was thinking about how easy it is for the inherited trauma of our ancestors and our own experience as children to give us false information that then affects these relationships we have as adults. And so I sort of turned this fun, hilarious romp I think my sister had in her head into this experience of exploring, could sisters who are estranged, could those bonds of sisterhood be strong enough to survive the secrets, survive the expression of those secrets, and could there be forgiveness, or is that just not possible? You know, so in short, I start with really easy questions in life, and then I write a book about them.
That's not some easy questions. That's some pretty deep stuff that you're talking about there. That's really intense. I love it. You know, because I think that, you know, I have a lot of, this is not about me, but I think that that's what you did there, is you took a simple experience like a road trip, and you, and a photograph where you realized that you might not have all the angles, and you turned that, you really explored that possibility and the emotional and consequences of that, and I love that. I don't think that was a simple question. I thought that was pretty good. So, excellent. Tell us about, are you working on any new books, and are you looking at extending the characters from these themes, or?
Yes and no. Okay. So Roadside is a standalone novel, but Releasing the Reins is the first in a series, and I'm working on the second, which is called Termination Dust right now. I'll say right now because, of course, titles changed. The title for that book changed significantly. So this book that I'm working on now sort of takes up where Releasing the Reins ends and explores the secrets in another family that is introduced into the original book. So I love series, but I also love standalones. You know, one of my heroes is Harlan Coben, and that's what he does. You know, he has his Bolitar series, and then he has his standalone books. So I like this thought of doing both. You know, of keeping this community going and exploring all the people in the community and their experiences, but then also just having the freedom to discover something like that photograph and take that in the path that it takes me on, whatever journey that takes me on.
I love that. That's interesting. Now we've already learned that your books take place in different times and places. Now, in your world building, I'm sure that you did use different kind of approaches to kind of each of these. Tell us how your favorite process of kind of building the world around these sisters, or these characters rather.
Yeah, so Releasing the Reins, I lived in Alaska, actually. I'm a graduate of the University of Alaska. And I'm married an Alaskan, and it's a place that's just deeply ingrained in my heart. And so I think that comes through in the book, my love for the setting. I didn't use a real place, mainly because I wanted to have the freedom to design it in a way that fit the plot really effectively. In its sequel, part of the story, so Releasing the Reins is a dual timeline, multiple POV novel, and in the sequel, one of the timelines will happen in Texas in 1959. So for that, fortunately, my daughter is currently living in Texas, so I use those trips to visit different places. For example, the last time we were there, we went to the Luling Oil Museum so that I could see, what did an oil field look like in 1959? What would an oil town look like? What did the train look like? Because I want it to be as authentic, realistic as possible. Sure. It's interesting for Roadside Sisters. They cross through 4 states because they're driving from Seattle to Reno, Nevada. And quite often for this book, I went on Google Maps and I went down to the 3D level and I drove the route, and it was really cool, actually. I just love that about technology.
Technology has made research a lot easier. That's for sure. I've done similar things in Istanbul and other places that I just haven't been able to get to yet. I do try to combine with real places I've been to, for sure.
Absolutely.
And I try to pick real places. We have time for maybe one good more question, and I want to know how do you, when you think about the reader experience, what is it that you're hoping will resonate with the readers the most? What is it that you want them to linger with afterwards?
What I'd really love is for them to find a very visceral connection to themselves in the book. So with Releasing the Reins, I've been to probably 8 book clubs, and I love it when women tell me the story of what they were not permitted to do or who tried to limit them in their lifetime. With Roadside Sisters on release day, I got a review, and the woman wrote in the review, "I haven't talked to my sister in 6 years and I called her today." And that right there is worth every minute of, of the difficulty of writing a book, the hard work of writing a book. So that's what I want. I want them to connect. I want them to feel something. I don't want them to just be entertained. I want it to stay with them.
Excellent. I wanted one final question. You've just joined AEN. Have you sold books directly before?
No, this is actually my first, my first experience. Jumped right in.
You jumped right in. Now, what attracted you to that model, and what are you hoping to get out of it the most?
I really wanted to connect with readers, personally, have that chance to talk to them, sign books. Of course, selling books is super important, but this organization seemed very professional. I knew many of the writers by either personally or by reputation, and so I knew it was very high quality. And I think that community experience, as writers, we're often alone, and it's really not. Doesn't have to be isolating. That sense of community, whether it's while you're writing or while you're selling books, I think is just really important. So I thought this would be just a great opportunity for me to connect with other writers, connect with readers, and sell some books and have some fun.
Well, Catherine, thank you for coming today. I'm so excited to have you as part of our group. So honored to spend some time with you. Amazing stories. Thank you so much for watching Meet the Author. Come to meet all the AEN authors during the summer event season in Seattle and Portland, and keep on reading.